Washington is optimistic about the chances of establishing the International Stabilization Force in Gaza and is working on advancing a new draft through the UN Security Council to create the unit. According to reports, the US is looking to bring the resolution creating the international mandate for establishing the ISF to a vote in the coming days so that the force can be deployed by the beginning of 2026. As per the draft resolution, the force will be responsible for stabilizing the security environment in Gaza by ensuring the process of demilitarizing the Gaza Strip, including the destruction and prevention of rebuilding the military, terror and offensive infrastructure, as well as the permanent decommissioning of weapons from non-state armed groups. Meanwhile, Canadian Foreign Minister Anita Anand has said that the G7 called for the security of Ukraine and the unimpeded flow of humanitarian aid into Gaza in a joint statement during the closing of the G7 Foreign Ministers meeting in Canada. Let's take a listen in to Anita Anand.
First, we reaffirmed our commitment to Ukraine's long-term prosperity, security, and defense. Canada has made it a priority of our G7 presidency to maintain and strengthen our support for Ukraine at every opportunity. We also turned our attention to the Middle East, to the urgent need for a path toward peace and lasting stability. We reiterated our support for the U.S. Comprehensive Peace Plan to end the Gaza conflict. And we continue to call for the unimpeded flow of humanitarian.
Peter, of course, there's a lot of speculation in who is going to be in this international stabilization force that's put into the Gaza Strip in order to maintain security in the region as we move from the first into the second phase. What are the key challenges in choosing said stabilization force?
Yeah, they are enormous. For Israel, there are certain red lines that she will not tolerate. The first one is the presence, excuse me, Thomas, the presence of a Turkish force. Now, Erdogan clearly feels emboldened domestically. He has his opposition has been diluted because of the force with which he's undertaken to suppress the opposition. He's emboldened because of his support for the new Syrian regime, which has just recently met in Washington, and by all accounts, the meeting went very, very well. So he feels that he has to further enhance his credibility within the Muslim world, and Turkey will definitely want some presence in Gaza, which Israel is dead against. Now, that will be the key issue. There are other Muslim countries that have suggested they would be providing a force in Gaza if called upon, such as Indonesia, Malaysia perhaps, and Israel would be quite content with that, but certainly not a Turkish presence, and that has to be navigated. And there's one other thing that the Israelis are very unhappy about, Thomas, if I may say, it's related to this topic, and that is the original Trump proposal, the 21-point proposal, suggested that there would be no room for those organisations, those NGOs, formally responsible for overseeing aid into Gaza. The main one being UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Refugee Works Agency, because of the way the Israelis felt were connected to Hamas. It now seems, because there's been a change in the wording, that UNRWA will indeed have a role, and that has really upset the Netanyahu cabinet. Now, the quid pro quo of that may just be that, okay, we're prepared to let UNRWA continue in a role of providing aid on the basis that perhaps no Turkish troops are in Gaza. That could be the negotiation process that's going on at the moment, but we'll have to wait and see. But in terms of the makeup of the force, Israel will certainly not want Irish troops there because of the experience they've had with the Irish troops in Lebanon. They probably don't want Spanish troops there because of the anti-Israeli Spanish government. But other than that, Turkish troops would be the main barrier, but other than those three, I think Israel would be quite happy to see Muslim countries dedicate forces to the peacekeeping and reconstruction process in Gaza.
Peter, of course, Turkey and of course their President Tayyip Erdogan have a great relationship with the Trump administration. Does Israel have the leverage to prevent that from happening?
Probably not. And I think Turkey will be quite forceful in demanding that they have some kind of presence there. And there could be a compromise in suggesting, well, okay, we won't have Turkish armed military force there, but in the presence of an unarmed peacekeeping force or a police force, something like that, some kind of security presence, that could be a compromise. But you're quite right. Erdogan and Trump have a very, very strong relationship. Trump's very pleased about the way the Syrian issue has come to fruition, and that's where Erdogan's leverage is. But Israel, of course, will have to make some kind of compromises, albeit having some kind of Turkish presence there. But an armed Turkish presence, I think she will fight against.
Yes, Peter, do stay with us as we have further information coming out of Israel, where it has been questioned at the United Nations over multiple reports of alleging the torture of Palestinian detainees, in particular since the Hamas invasion of October the 7th of 2023. The Committee of the Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman or Degrading Treatment or Punishment by Member Countries. Rapporteur Peter Vidal-Kessing of the UN Committee Against Torture says Israeli forces have sharply escalated torture since October the 7th, including severe beatings, electric shocks, waterboarding and threats of rape. Acts, he said, are carried out with mere total impunity. Let's listen in to what Peter Vidal had to say.
However, the committee has been deeply appalled by the description we have received in a large number of alternative reports of what appears to be systematic and widespread torture and ill treatment of Palestinians, including children and vulnerable groups. The reports we have received come from many different sources, from international bodies, including various UN bodies, from NGOs in Israel, from NGOs in Palestine, and from international NGOs and other sources. All these reports provide detailed and very identical descriptions of torture and ill treatment inflicted on Palestinian detainees. They also highlight that torture and ill treatment has escalated sharply since 7th of October 2023, reaching unprecedented levels and carried out with near total impunity. Many of those detained and subsequently released have reportedly been subject to torture and other ill treatment. Severe beatings, including on the genitals, electric shocks, being forced to remain in stressed positions in prolonged periods, deliberate inhuman conditions and starvation, waterboarding, and widespread sexual insults and threats of rape. The fact that one of the parties to the armed conflict violates and disregards obligation under these rules cannot be used as an excuse for the other party to the armed conflict to violate and disregard their obligations under international.
Peter Baum joins us once again. Peter, of course, this comes from a long list of people and organisations who accuse Israel of mistreating Palestinian detainees. Of course, Israel currently faces a huge scandal of the CD T-Men prison, but of course this goes different. This UN body has said that these acts were carried out with mere total impunity. Is this legitimate scrutiny for those against those Palestinian detainees?
Well, absolutely not. I mean, Israel is a functioning democracy, and if acts such as these are proven, then it would be hoped that Israel will go through the due legal process, as she has done before, where acts of violence against prisoners have been taken to court and the perpetrators jailed. So contend with, and we know how from cradle to grave trials such as this, if it does come to trial, can take an age. She will be more aware of the demonisation of Israel in the propaganda war more than anything else. So it would be hoped that at some stage an Israeli government will look into all these acts, take them on board, and bring any perpetrators through their criminal justice system. What we also know is, Thomas, that the UN will will give every opportunity to keep this in the public domain, because the UN's spots haven't changed. She will still want to demonise Israel and keep this at the forefront.
Yes, Peter Baum, thank you very much for joining us here on the programme. It's always a pleasure.